ריבונו של עולם, אני מבקש ממך.
Hi everyone, good Shabbos. It's Reuben Levine once again. Last week we celebrated the completion of the book of Genesis. It's the book that tells us about the infancy of the Jewish people and the birth of the Jewish people and the birth of the world. Now, when we get into the Sefer of Shmot, Exodus, we're now going to learn about the maturation of the Jewish people, the miraculous process of going to nursery school as a people, elementary school, and ultimately through adolescence. Like in our own educational process when we're young and we're going through our own child development, we are getting introduced to all kinds of principles and themes as we grow up, and we begin to establish this notion that things have a cause and effect. We come to expect things to happen, and we take them for granted. The sun's going to rise in the morning, and it's going to set in the evening. It's going to be light for part of the 24-hour cycle. It's going to be dark for part of the 24-hour cycle. Chemical reactions take place when you put them together in a petri dish. We just spend this period of time getting introduced to things that are on one hand wondrous, and they make an implant or an imprint in our minds. But after a while, they're just rote. We just come to expect them, and there's nothing special about them after a while. The same thing is with math. 2 + 2 = 4. We really don't question that. We don't get involved in that. When we first learn it, we're like, oh, wow, postulates, theorems, geometry, and exponential mathematics. All these things are things that God created in this world in order for it to run and in order for our intellect to go ahead and connect with it. But at the same time, we also have to stop for a moment as we get older and realize that this stuff is also divine. And when we look at this week's Parsha, it's so packed with these principles and concepts. Where do we first see it? I'm going to read here. We know that a new Pharaoh comes into power who does not know Joseph and does not know his people. He seems to be unsympathetic. And even more so, he passes decrees to throw the boys, the male infants, into the Nile River because they're so overwhelmed and they're so intimidated by the speedy growth and connection of this people, and they're threatened by it. And he actually makes it the responsibility of the Jewish women to kill these children. And we're told about Shifra and Puah, who later we learn is Yocheved and Miriam, Moses' mother and sister, who stuck their neck out. They ignored this decree and they saved these children. And under tremendous amount of a threat to their life, and they put themselves at risk in order to do this. And we're told what happened to them, what was the reward that was given to them, that from Yocheved came the Levite tribe, Moses, Aaron, and the entire priestly tribe of Levi came from this, because there was a counterbalance. There was a mathematical equation that if you stick your neck out and you sacrifice for faith, later on you will receive a reward. And sometimes it's generations later. Miriam, we're told that the Davidic dynasty and the Messiah actually came from her because she did these things. And we're told, if we look here, it says, Schar hamishtadel lahachayot banav shel makom matzinu batorah. Where do we learn this? That we actually see this risk that they take, and what happens. Vatirena hamiyaldot et haelokim velo asu kasher diber alehem melech Mitzrayim v'techayena et haeladim. They didn't listen to the melech of Mitzrayim, to the king of Mitzrayim. They did it anyways, and they saved these children. Shahayu mishpakot lahem mayim umazon. Rashi tells us that they would give them food and give them water and help sustain them. And later on, we learn that it's because of Miriam that in the desert where there was no water, we got a well that followed us around. Because of Moses and the sacrifices he made, we received manna. We received the divine food that came from the heavens every single day to feed us. It was on the merits of these actions and these activities that ultimately there was a reward. There was a chain reaction. There was a counterbalance that took place. And what we learn here is that God built this word with this concept called midah keneged midah, that there's always a cause and an effect, and there's always a counterbalance, just like 2 + 2 = 4, or just like -9 + 9 = 0. Just like that kind of math, also in faith and in spirituality, when you sacrifice and when you make an effort and when you try to preserve that bond between us as an eldest child, the chosen people, and God, that we are going to be ultimately rewarded. Now, one of the central themes of this week's Parsha is the burning bush. And we're told that Moses actually was walking around and he smelled the fire, and instead of just saying, oh, there's a fire on a bush and keep on going, he stopped and he came and he took notice and he looked closer. And when he looked closer and when he peeled back the onion on what he was looking at and began to understand it and appreciate it, that's when he realized that the bush was not being consumed. There was something miraculous going on there. And we need to understand and see that there's these miracles, this cause and effect, this counterbalance, this midah keneged midah that is going on all the time. And it happens wherever we go, and we'll see it throughout Torah for years to come. Actually, there's a book that was written called The Chapter of Our Fathers, Pirkei Avot, that is a bunch of parables that starts with Moshe to Joshua all the way on down through the rabbis. And there's one in particular that I noticed, which might be relevant for many people now, is by Rabbi Yochanan. It says, Rabbi Yochanan Omer, Kol hamekayim et haTorah me'oni, sofo l'kaima me'osher. Anyone who follows the Torah, learns the Torah, and enhances their spiritual journey when they're poor, when they have nothing, ultimately they will find themselves in a situation later where they have wealth and they're rich. And then it goes on to say, V'chol hamivatel et haTorah me'osher, and anyone who ignores the Torah and doesn't pay attention and doesn't follow and doesn't learn and doesn't delve and doesn't search and doesn't inquire and be inquisitive, when they're rich, sofo levatla me'oni, ultimately they will find themselves in a situation where they'll be poor. This counterbalance is constantly operating for us in this world. And just like the day is followed by the night, and there's light, darkness is followed by daylight, these things we take for granted. And we just think that they're always going to happen. And in essence, that's not the case. God built the fabric of this world around us in such a way that there's always a counterbalance. There's always a cause and effect. And the more difficult times get, the more sacrifices you make, and the more you put the energy in, nonetheless, to appreciate it, learn it, and stay steadfast in it, ultimately the reward is going to be huge. I hope that all of us during these very challenging times can reach back and become stronger and become more fervent.
ממך